Have you ever felt like you're running as fast as you can, but somehow everyone else is still ahead of you? Like you're putting in the work, following the advice, checking all the boxes, but the life you want keeps slipping further away. You watch your friends buying houses while you're still renting. You see former classmates getting promotions while you're stuck in the same position. You scroll through social media watching others live the life you thought you'd have by now. And the voice starts. That cruel internal narrator that whispers you're not good enough, not smart enough, not disciplined enough. You're behind, you're failing, you're wasting your life while everyone else figures it out. But what if I told you that everything you've been taught about success, progress, and life direction is a carefully constructed lie? What if the reason you feel behind isn't because you're slow, but because you're being pulled toward destinations that were never meant for you? What if the path everyone insists you should follow is actually leading you away from the life you're supposed to live? Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher who understood the weight of human choice, wrote, "Man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does." But here's what Sartre couldn't have foreseen. We've created a world where that freedom has been packaged, marketed, and sold back to us as a series of predetermined paths that masquerade as choice. This isn't about giving up ambition or rejecting all social expectations. This is about recognizing that the race you think you're losing might be a race you never wanted to run in the first place. And the moment you stop trying to catch up and start questioning the direction, everything changes. Your pace, your purpose, your entire understanding of what it means to live a meaningful life. Society has turned human existence into a conveyor belt. Get good grades, go to college, get a job, climb the ladder, buy things, get married, have kids, buy bigger things, retire, die. And at each stage, there are metrics, benchmarks, ways to measure whether you're keeping up or falling behind. But here's the insidious part. These metrics aren't neutral measurements of progress. They're products, manufactured by systems that profit from your insecurity, your constant feeling of inadequacy, your desperate need to catch up. The race isn't designed for you to win. It's designed for you to keep running. Think about it. The moment you achieve one milestone, the goalposts move. You get the degree, now you need the better job. You get the job, now you need the promotion. You get the promotion, now you need the house. You get the house, now you need the bigger house. There's always another level, another benchmark, another way to feel behind. Byung-Chul Han, the German-Korean philosopher who brilliantly dissected our achievement society, identified this trap with surgical precision. He called it burnout society, a world where we've internalized the demand for constant optimization, constant improvement, constant movement toward goals that someone else defined for us. We've become, in Han's words, entrepreneurs of our own souls, constantly working to improve a product that can never be good enough. The cruel genius of this system is that it makes you complicit in your own exhaustion. You're not being forced to run this race. You're choosing it. You're the one checking social media to see how you measure up. You're the one accepting jobs that drain your soul because they look good on paper. You're the one pursuing relationships that fulfill societal expectations rather than personal desires. But what if the reason you feel behind isn't because you're failing at the race, but because some part of you, the deepest, most authentic part, is refusing to run it? What if your struggle isn't a sign of weakness, but a sign of wisdom? What if your inability to keep up with a system that destroys human souls is actually proof that your soul is still intact? The manufactured race creates manufactured problems. Financial anxiety about keeping up with lifestyles you don't even want. Career stress about climbing ladders that lead nowhere meaningful. Relationship pressure to hit timeline milestones that have nothing to do with actual compatibility or love. And the solution to these manufactured problems? More consumption, more achievement, more running toward goals that recede as you approach them. You're not behind. You're being pulled toward a finish line that doesn't exist, in a race that has no winners, only exhausted participants who mistake movement for progress. Every day, you're bombarded with images of lives you're supposed to want. The entrepreneur with the Tesla and the minimalist apartment, the influencer with the perfect relationship and the enviable travel schedule. The former colleague who seems to have it all figured out with their dream job and their picture-perfect family. But here's what nobody tells you about these images. They're not neutral inspiration, they're gravitational forces. Each one pulls you slightly off your natural trajectory, bending your path toward destinations that belong to someone else's journey. You start wanting things not because they align with your values, but because they represent success in the collective imagination. This is the gravity of other people's dreams, and it's one of the most destructive forces in modern life. It doesn't feel like coercion because it comes disguised as aspiration. You think you're choosing your goals when you're actually absorbing them from an environment designed to make you perpetually dissatisfied with your current reality. Max Weber, the sociologist who understood how social structures shape individual behavior, wrote about the iron cage of modernity. How seemingly free choices become constrained by systems of rationalization and efficiency. Today's iron cage isn't made of bureaucracy, it's made of curated images, viral success stories, and algorithmic feeds that show you exactly what you're missing. The algorithm doesn't know what you actually want, it only knows what gets engagement, what creates desire, what makes you stay on the platform longer. So it feeds you an endless stream of lives that look more interesting, more successful, more fulfilling than your own. And slowly, imperceptibly, these external images begin to colonize your internal compass. You start measuring your relationships against the highlight reels of others. You judge your career progress against the victories of people whose struggles you never see. You evaluate your happiness against the carefully curated contentment of strangers. The gravity is so subtle, so constant, that you don't realize you're being pulled off course until you're exhausted from chasing dreams that were never yours. But other people's dreams aren't just found on social media. They're embedded in family expectations, cultural traditions, professional hierarchies. Your parents' unfulfilled ambitions become your inherited obligations. Your culture's definitions of success become your unquestioned goals. Your industry's markers of achievement become your measures of self-worth. The most insidious part is that these borrowed dreams often come with built-in justifications. I want financial security. Translation: I want to impress people with my wealth. I want to make a difference. Translation: I want recognition for my contribution. I want a stable relationship. Translation: I want to appear normal and successful. The surface reasons sound reasonable, but underneath, you're chasing symbols rather than substance. Breaking free from this gravitational pull requires something radical. The willingness to disappoint people, to let down the collective expectations, to stop optimizing for external validation and start optimizing for internal alignment. Most people never do this because the gravity is comfortable. It tells you where to go, what to want, how to measure yourself. Freedom is terrifying because it offers no guarantees, no roadmap, no external validation that you're going the right way. The biggest lie ever sold to the human spirit is that life is supposed to be linear, that progress moves in a straight line from worse to better, from less to more, from behind to ahead. This mythology is so deeply embedded in our thinking that we rarely question it, but it's the source of most of our suffering about being behind. Real life doesn't work this way. Real growth is cyclical, spiral, chaotic. You advance and retreat, learn and unlearn, build and tear down. You spend years developing skills that become irrelevant. You pursue paths that lead to dead ends. You achieve goals that leave you empty. This isn't failure. This is how human development actually works. But linear progress mythology is profitable. It sells courses that promise 10 steps to success. It creates anxiety that can be soothed with products. It generates content that keeps you coming back for the next level. the next hack, the next shortcut to the life you're supposed to want. The mythology needs you to believe that you're behind, so you'll keep paying to catch up. Alan Watts, the philosopher who bridged Eastern wisdom and Western psychology, understood this perfectly. He wrote about the futility of trying to achieve happiness through accumulation, whether of possessions, achievements, or experiences. Watts called it the backwards law. The harder you chase something, the more elusive it becomes. The more desperately you try to get ahead, the more behind you feel. The linear progress myth creates what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, the tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness despite positive or negative events. You achieve the goal, get the promotion, buy the thing, and after a brief spike of satisfaction, you're back to feeling like you're not enough. So you set bigger goals, chase bigger achievements, buy bigger things. The treadmill speeds up, but you never actually get anywhere. This isn't a personal failing. It's a design feature of the system. Consumer capitalism requires dissatisfaction to function. If you were genuinely content with what you have, if you felt like you were exactly where you should be, if you stopped believing you were behind, entire industries would collapse. Your dissatisfaction is their business model. The mythology of linear progress also ignores the reality of different life phases. There are times for building and times for reflecting, times for advancement and times for integration, times for expansion and times for contraction. But the mythology demands constant upward movement, treating natural cycles of human development as failures to optimize. Breaking free from linear progress mythology requires developing what Zen Buddhism calls beginner's mind, the ability to approach each moment, each choice, each phase of life without the burden of comparison to where you should be. It means measuring progress not by external benchmarks, but by internal alignment, not by how far you've come, but by how authentic you've become. When you abandon the mythology of linear progress, you stop seeing setbacks as failures and start seeing them as course corrections. You stop measuring your life against timelines that were created by people who don't know you. You start understanding that the most meaningful progress often looks like moving backwards, sideways, or standing still while everyone else rushes toward destinations they haven't questioned. If you're not behind, if you're just being pulled in the wrong direction, then the question becomes, what is the right direction? How do you find your authentic path when you've been following someone else's map for so long? The answer isn't in more planning, more goal setting, or more optimization. It's in learning to recognize a completely different kind of currency, internal alignment. Most people navigate life using external currency: money, status, approval, achievement. These are easy to measure, compare, and accumulate. But there's another currency that most people never learn to recognize: the feeling of being in alignment with your authentic self. This currency can't be photographed for social media. It can't be measured on a resume. It often looks like failure to people who only understand external metrics. Internal alignment feels different from external achievement. Achievement feels like relief, the temporary cessation of anxiety about not being good enough. Alignment feels like resonance, a deep sense that you're moving in harmony with something larger than your ego. Achievement requires constant maintenance and escalation. Alignment is self-sustaining and naturally evolving. Abraham Maslow, the psychologist who revolutionized our understanding of human motivation, wrote extensively about what he called self-actualization, the process of becoming who you're truly meant to be rather than who you think you should be. Maslow discovered that self-actualized people operate from a completely different value system. They're less concerned with external validation and more focused on internal growth, less driven by deficiency needs and more motivated by growth needs. But recognizing authentic direction requires developing sensitivity to signals that our culture has taught us to ignore. The feeling of dread when you think about your 5-year plan, the energy drain after conversations about networking, The way certain activities make time disappear while others make every minute feel like an hour. The difference between exhaustion from hard work and exhaustion from misaligned work. Your body knows your authentic direction before your mind does. It sends signals through energy levels, sleep patterns, physical tension, emotional responses. But we've been trained to override these signals, to push through resistance, to ignore discomfort as weakness rather than wisdom. We've learned to suspect our instincts and trust external authorities about what we should want and how we should live. Finding authentic direction also means distinguishing between your desires and your conditioning. Do you want the promotion because it aligns with your values, or because promotions are what ambitious people are supposed to want? Do you want the relationship because this person enhances your life, or because being in a relationship is what successful adults do? Do you want the house because it feels like home, or because home ownership is a marker of financial maturity? The currency of authentic direction can't be deposited in a bank, but it pays dividends that external achievement never can. Sustainable motivation, genuine fulfillment, resilience during setbacks, and the deep satisfaction of living a life that belongs to you rather than performing a life that belongs to someone else's idea of success. If this resonates with something deep inside you, if you're starting to suspect that your feelings of being behind might actually be wisdom trying to redirect you, then subscribe. Because this channel isn't for people who want to run faster in the same race. It's for people who are ready to question the race itself. It's for those who understand that the most radical thing you can do in a world obsessed with external metrics is to start optimizing for internal alignment instead. The moment you start following your authentic direction, you will disappoint people. This isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. Because living authentically means refusing to be who others need you to be. And that refusal will trigger every unhealed wound, every unconscious expectation, every projection that people have placed on you. Your parents will be confused because you're not following the path they sacrificed to make possible. Your friends will be threatened because your different choices reflect the compromises they're not ready to examine. Your colleagues will be irritated because your authenticity makes their performance feel more effortful. Society will label you selfish because you're no longer participating in the collective delusion that external achievement equals internal fulfillment. This is where most people turn back. The social pressure, the guilt, the fear of isolation becomes too much. They return to the familiar misery of the wrong direction because it's more comfortable than the unknown territory of authentic living. They choose the security of being accepted for who they're pretending to be over the risk of being rejected for who they actually are. But here's what nobody tells you about the courage to disappoint. It's not actually about other people. It's about disappointing the false version of yourself that you've been maintaining to keep others comfortable. It's about letting down the persona that you've constructed to win approval, get ahead, and avoid rejection. The hardest person to disappoint is the image you've built of who you should be. Emmanuel Levinas, the philosopher who understood the ethical complexity of human relationships, wrote about the face of the other, how we're called to responsibility through our encounters with other people. But Levinas also understood that authentic responsibility sometimes requires saying no, setting boundaries, refusing to be what others demand. True ethical living isn't about people-pleasing. It's about being honest about who you are and what you can authentically offer. The courage to disappoint requires developing what psychologists call differentiation, the ability to maintain your sense of self while remaining connected to others. It means you can love someone without needing their approval. You can care about someone's feelings without making those feelings your responsibility. You can be part of a group without losing your individual identity. Most people live in a state of chronic codependence, constantly adjusting their behavior, choices, and even their internal experience to manage other people's emotions. They've learned to read rooms instead of reading themselves, to prioritize others' comfort over their own authenticity, to measure their worth by how well they fulfill others' expectations. Breaking this pattern feels like betrayal at first. You'll feel guilty for wanting what you want instead of what you should want. You'll feel selfish for prioritizing your own growth over others' preferences. You'll feel scared that authenticity means isolation, that being yourself means losing love. These feelings are normal and temporary. They're the withdrawal symptoms of recovering from the addiction to external validation. But the courage to disappoint isn't about becoming cruel or selfish. It's about becoming honest. Honest about your limitations, your desires, your boundaries, your path. It's about offering your authentic self instead of a performance designed to keep others comfortable. Paradoxically, this honesty often creates deeper, more genuine relationships than people-pleasing ever could. When you stop trying to be what everyone else needs you to be, you discover what you actually have to offer. When you stop managing others' emotions, you have energy available for your own growth. When you stop following paths chosen by others, you can finally see where your own feet want to go. If you're being pulled in the wrong direction, the solution isn't to run faster. It's to eliminate the forces that are pulling you off course. This requires a different kind of discipline than our culture typically celebrates. Not the discipline of addition, but the discipline of subtraction. Not the willpower to do more, but the wisdom to do less. Most productivity advice focuses on optimization, efficiency, and getting more done. But when you're moving in the wrong direction, optimization just gets you to the wrong destination faster. Strategic elimination is about identifying what's pulling you away from your authentic path and having the courage to remove it, even when that removal feels like failure to external observers. This might mean eliminating social media platforms that make you feel inadequate, ending friendships that are based on competition rather than connection, leaving organizations that demand you compromise your values for advancement, stopping habits that numb you to your internal compass, refusing invitations to events that drain your energy without offering genuine value. Henry David Thoreau, the transcendentalist who understood the power of intentional living, spent 2 years at Walden Pond practicing exactly this kind of elimination. He wrote, "A man is rich in proportion to the number of things which he can afford to let alone." Thoreau wasn't advocating for poverty or isolation. He was demonstrating that abundance comes not from having more, but from needing less that doesn't align with your authentic self. Strategic elimination requires distinguishing between healthy sacrifice and unhealthy deprivation. Healthy sacrifice feels like shedding weight, difficult at first, but ultimately liberating. You give up things that were weighing you down anyway. Unhealthy deprivation feels like cutting off essential parts of yourself, diminishing and destructive. Learning this distinction is crucial because not all elimination serves authentic direction. The hardest things to eliminate are often the ones that look good from the outside. The prestigious job that pays well but kills your soul. The relationship that checks all the boxes but lacks genuine connection. The social circle that elevates your status but requires you to perform a false version of yourself. These eliminations will confuse people because they can't understand why you'd give up something that appears successful. Strategic elimination also applies to mental patterns and emotional habits, eliminating the compulsion to compare yourself to others, removing the habit of seeking validation for choices that don't require anyone else's approval, stopping the pattern of justifying your authentic desires to people who will never understand them, cutting out the internal voices that aren't actually yours. The process of elimination reveals what's essential. When you remove everything that doesn't belong, what remains is your authentic core. But this process requires faith because you're often eliminating the known for the unknown, the secure for the uncertain, the approved for the authentic. It requires trusting that there's something valuable underneath all the layers of conditioning and compromise. Strategic elimination isn't about becoming a minimalist or rejecting all social connections. It's about becoming discerning. It's about creating space for what matters by removing what doesn't. It's about protecting your energy, attention, and authentic direction from forces that would scatter them in directions that serve others' agendas rather than your own. When you practice strategic elimination, you stop feeling behind because you're no longer racing toward destinations that were never yours to begin with. You stop feeling scattered because you're no longer trying to be everything to everyone. You start feeling aligned because you've removed the obstacles to authentic movement. Underneath all the conditioning, beneath all the shoulds and supposed tos, beyond all the external metrics and artificial timelines, you have a navigation system that knows exactly where you're meant to go. It's been broadcasting signals your entire life, but the noise of other people's expectations has drowned out its quiet wisdom. This internal navigation system doesn't speak in the language of logic or societal approval. It communicates through energy, intuition, resonance, and inexplicable knowing. It tells you which opportunities feel expansive and which feel contractive, which relationships energize you and which drain you, which activities make time disappear and which make every minute feel labored. But we've been trained to distrust this system. We're told it's unreliable, unscientific, impractical. We're taught to override our instincts with external authorities, to ignore our gut feelings in favor of rational analysis, to suspect our desires as selfish and trust others' expertise about what's good for us. We've learned to navigate life using GPS devices programmed by people who don't know where we actually want to go. Carl Jung, the depth psychologist who mapped the territory of the unconscious, understood this internal guidance as what he called the self with a capital S, the organizing principle of the psyche that contains your unique blueprint for development. Jung discovered that when people align with this deeper self, they experience what he called individuation, the process of becoming who they're truly meant to be, rather than who they think they should be. Your internal navigation system operates on principles that seem counterintuitive to our achievement-oriented culture. It values process over outcomes, being over doing, depth over breadth. It might guide you toward experiences that look like detours, but turn out to be essential preparation. It might steer you away from opportunities that look perfect on paper, but feel wrong in your body. Learning to trust this navigation system requires developing new sensitivities, noticing the difference between excitement and anxiety. Both create arousal, but excitement feels expansive, while anxiety feels contractive. Distinguishing between genuine desire and manufactured want, authentic desire feels like recognition, while manufactured want feels like acquisition. Recognizing the difference between your voice and the voices of your conditioning. Your voice feels calm and certain, while conditioned voices feel urgent and demanding. The navigation system also speaks through what doesn't happen as much as what does. The opportunities that mysteriously fall through. The relationships that naturally fade away, the paths that close despite your efforts. Sometimes the system protects you from wrong directions by making them impossible rather than simply undesirable. Trusting your internal navigation doesn't mean ignoring practical considerations or becoming impulsive. It means including your deeper wisdom in decision-making processes that have been dominated by external factors. It means asking not just, will this get me ahead, but does this feel aligned? Not just, what will people think, but what does my authentic self know? The paradox of following your internal navigation is that it often leads you in directions that look like going backward, sideways, or nowhere at all to external observers. You might leave a secure job to pursue something uncertain. You might end a relationship that looks good on paper but feels empty. You might move to a place that doesn't advance your career but feels like home. When you start trusting your internal navigation system, you stop feeling behind because you're finally moving in your authentic direction. The timeline becomes irrelevant because you're no longer measuring yourself against external benchmarks. The destination becomes less important than the integrity of the journey. One of the most destructive aspects of feeling behind is the tyranny of collective timing. Society has created artificial deadlines for human development. When you should graduate, when you should get married, when you should have children, when you should buy a house, when you should achieve certain career milestones. These timelines have nothing to do with your individual development and everything to do with institutional convenience. Your authentic self operates on its own timing, which rarely aligns with social expectations or cultural deadlines. Some people are ready for commitment at 20, others at 40. Some discover their calling in childhood, others in their 60s. Some need decades to process trauma before they can move forward. Others heal quickly and advance rapidly. Personal timing isn't about being fast or slow. It's about being synchronous with your own development. The revolution of personal timing means rejecting the idea that there's a right age for anything except what feels right for you. It means understanding that readiness is an internal state, not an external deadline. It means trusting that your life is unfolding at exactly the pace it needs to unfold, even when that pace frustrates you or confuses others. Joseph Campbell, the mythologist who mapped the universal patterns of human transformation, wrote about what he called the hero's journey, the archetypal process of leaving the familiar, facing challenges, and returning transformed. Campbell discovered that this journey can't be rushed or forced. It has its own internal logic, its own necessary timing, its own seasons of preparation and action. Personal timing also means recognizing that different aspects of your life develop at different rates. Your career might advance rapidly while your emotional life develops slowly. Your creative abilities might emerge late while your practical skills develop early. Your relationships might deepen gradually while your spiritual understanding arrives in sudden leaps. There's no template for how all these areas should coordinate. The pressure of collective timing creates artificial urgency about decisions that benefit from patience and manufactured anxiety about processes that require time. It makes you rush into commitments you're not ready for and delay changes you're prepared to make. It turns natural development cycles into sources of shame and self-judgment. Breaking free from collective timing requires developing what might be called chronological courage, the willingness to live according to your own developmental needs, rather than society's arbitrary schedules. This might mean staying in school longer than expected, changing careers later than conventional, or making commitments earlier than others think is wise. Personal timing also means understanding that readiness isn't the same as perfection. You don't have to be completely healed to start a relationship, completely skilled to begin a new career, or completely sure to make a major change. Readiness is about having enough internal resources and external support to handle what comes next, not about having everything figured out in advance. The revolution of personal timing transforms your relationship with age, development, and life phases. Instead of seeing yourself as behind or ahead, you start seeing yourself as exactly where you are. Instead of rushing toward the next milestone, you start appreciating the current phase of development. Instead of judging your pace against others, you start honoring your own rhythm. When you embrace personal timing, you stop feeling behind because you're no longer racing against artificial deadlines. You start making decisions based on internal readiness rather than external pressure. You begin to see that the timing of your life is perfect for your life, even when it doesn't match anyone else's expectations or understanding. You came here believing you were behind, that you needed to catch up, that you were failing at the race everyone else seemed to be winning. But now you understand the truth. There is no race. There are only individual journeys, each with its own direction, timing, and destination. The feeling of being behind was the signal that you were moving in a direction that wasn't yours. The pathless path is the one you create by walking it, step by step, choice by choice, elimination by elimination. It's the path that emerges when you stop following other people's maps and start trusting your own navigation system. It's the path that appears when you have the courage to disappoint expectations and the wisdom to honor your authentic timing. This path won't look impressive to people who measure progress by external metrics. It might involve periods of what appears to be stagnation, regression, or lateral movement. It might include choices that confuse people who love you and concern people who don't understand you, but it will be yours in a way that no predetermined path could ever be. Jean-Paul Sartre understood that freedom is both exhilarating and terrifying because it places the full responsibility for your life on your shoulders. But he also understood that this responsibility is what makes life meaningful. When you stop trying to live up to external expectations and start living up to your authentic potential, when you stop following other people's directions and start creating your own, you become the author of your existence rather than a character in someone else's story. The pathless path requires faith, not in a predetermined destiny, but in your capacity to navigate uncertainty with integrity. It requires courage, not to take massive risks, but to make authentic choices, even when they're misunderstood. It requires patience, not to wait for permission, but to honor your own developmental timing. You're not behind. You've never been behind. You've been gathering the experiences, developing the wisdom, and building the courage necessary to step off the collective conveyor belt and onto your own authentic path. Every moment of feeling lost was actually a moment of finding yourself. Every experience of being pulled in the wrong direction was teaching you to recognize your right direction. The world needs people who have the courage to live authentically, not because it's easy or profitable or impressive, but because it's true. It needs people who are willing to disappoint the collective in order to satisfy their authentic self. It needs people who understand that real progress isn't about keeping up with others, but about staying aligned with your own deepest knowing. Your path might not be fast, but it will be yours. It might not be impressive, but it will be authentic. It might not be understood, but it will be meaningful. And in a world full of people racing toward destinations they never questioned, living a life that actually belongs to you is the most radical thing you can do. If this message awakens something in you that's been waiting to be acknowledged, if you're ready to stop measuring yourself against external benchmarks and start trusting your internal compass, then subscribe. Because this is just the beginning of understanding what becomes possible when you stop trying to catch up and start showing up as who you actually are. Write in the comments, "I choose my own direction." Let's see how many people are ready to step off the conveyor belt of collective expectations and onto the pathless path of authentic living. You're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be to take the next step in your own direction. And that direction, whatever it is the only one that can take you home to yourself. The race you thought you were losing is a race that no one can win because the finish line keeps moving and the prize is always empty. But the path you create by following your authentic direction, that path leads somewhere real, somewhere that belongs to you, somewhere that's been waiting for you to have the courage to find it. Welcome to your own life. It's been waiting for you to show up,